would like to speak about something important. And understanding ecosystem is obviously something very important, not only for ecologists, not only for biologists, not only to those beings who are living all possible species around us, but for the whole future of humankind. The role of semiosis in ecosystems, or semaphils and other phenomena of biosemiotic relations, would be the title of this lecture. The main question, the problem, I probably can do in this way, and then also, okay, is to what extent are semiotic processes responsible for ecosystem dynamics, for ecosystem structure, or ecosystem diversity? What would be the biosemiotic understanding of the ecosystem? In order to answer this question, we should be able to distinguish between semiotic processes in ecosystem and non-semiotic processes in ecosystem. This is what, up to now, I would say, no textbook in ecology really does. So that's our task. And here, some biosemiotic concept could help to illustrate this, what will happen with our understanding, our view, our description of ecosystem when we use biosemiotic perspectives. So our problem here is how the whole understanding of ecosystem will change through biosemiotics. And here's the plan of this talk. First, a little bit about ecosystem, then 4 main parts about the concept of interpretation here in ecology, together with some, introducing some older biosemiotic concepts as semaphils, as semiochemicals, as semaphoront even. Then we'll go to the network of interpretation, what that means, how it creates natural categorization, various congregations, territoriality, and speciation. Then the concept of semiotic fitting, the problem of relationship between coevolution and semiotic fitting, or natural selection versus search and finding. Then network of semiotic fitting, how it is related to integration of multi-species communities up to aesthetic succession, and then 7 points for conclusion. So, first, ecosystem. What is ecosystem? Ecosystem is something, in a way, very simple. It's all living in a certain area or in a certain space. It's also element cycling due to life. And this scheme now represents the core of ecosystem. This is cycling between inorganic and organic compounds, where, or another way to say it, this is just photosynthesis and breathing, 2 main processes. Photosynthesis is the process what transforms inorganic compounds into organic, and breathing is transforming organic into inorganic. A little bit simplifying, but more or less like this. The first process is carried on by autotrophic cells, and the other, breathing, by heterotrophic cells. All these cells together is all life. The term ecosystem is not so very old. It was introduced only in 1935 into biology, science. Now, it can be described completely in chemical terms. It's, well, biochemistry, basically. As Jesper Hofmeyr told, that's biochemistry, that's the core of biology. So in my first course in biology, first year in biology, we were taught 4 different courses of chemistry, because that was the era in 1970s of understanding the biology through chemistry, life through chemistry. Ukrainian biochemist, geobiochemist Vladimir Vernadsky described whole biosphere as the chemistry of the earth transformed by life. Now, organic compounds can be transformed at normal temperature almost only with the help of enzymes. That means with the help of living organisms. But enzymatic catalysis is not yet by itself a semiotic process. Clearly not. Which are the simplest semiotic processes is not yet clear. So that is a big discussion ongoing in our biosemiotic community also. We clearly agree about more complex processes as semiotic, but what are the minimal ones? That's at first we in biosemiotics thought that life process and semiotic process are the same. Now, later it's maybe not so reasonable to just to declare the identity, but scientifically, let's say, study whether they are identical. Now, about simplest, we, at least that's my view, we still need to study, we do not know it precisely. But a process is certainly semiotic if it is interpretive. Interpretation as a process is clearly, that's also, I would say, everybody in biosemiotics agreed with that. Now, in theoretical ecology, until now, semiosis was considered marginal. And there are only few review papers about semiotic ecology published in this, let's say, in ecology encyclopedias or something like, where ecology as a whole is introduced. But already there are some. And now also Timo Maran's review paper on semiotics in ecology and environmental studies appeared recently in Bloomsbury Semiotic 4-volume set. Let's then go to interpretation. One way to define interpretation is that interpretive processes are those in which choosing between possibilities take place. I think this is pretty close to the common everyday understanding of the word interpretation. Interpretation is a process where what's chosen can be also chosen otherwise. So a process what's not fully deterministic. And semiosis can be defined, actually, in Persian semiotics it is done so. Semiosis is the process of interpretation. Interpretation requires simultaneous availability. That means sensing the existence of alternative options or possibilities. It requires indeterminacy, some freedom of choosing. That means absence of controlling force or algorithm which would make one of the options necessary to materialize. And it requires work, simple work to carry on this process. So this is semiosis. Interpreting itself has many important consequences. We can also accept that communication is always requiring interpretation. So we can say that these phenomena about what we are talking now in ecosystem semiotic phenomena. They are very, or in a large part, also communicative phenomena. So some implications between organisms, some interactions between organisms are semiotic. Some are not, but some are. Those interactions, which are based on interpretation, are semiotic. And the organism interpretation processes lead to emergence of formation of signs, to natural categorization, swarms, herds, flocks, including speciation as a result of mutual interpretation, to semiotic fitting and formation of integrated communities, or biosenosis, associations of different organisms and consortia, and also to stabilization through communication or semiosis, the structure of multi-species community, which is largely made of semiotic bonds, and harmonization of ecosystem, which we can think of as an aesthetic process. So semiotic ecology would provide alternative to the neo-Darwinian model based on the concept of that the neo-Darwinian model, which is based on reproductive success. I think it's different. Now, about all this now in some detail. First, about some older semiotic concepts of biological science. Some, I would say, older in the sense of even some pre-Sebiokian biosemiotics. And that was my relatively recent finding, that there was a biologist called Elmar Lepik, who worked at first in Estonia, later in the United States, who very early introduced a whole set of biosemiotic terms about which I and most others, biosemioticians, hadn't heard earlier. Term semaphores already in 1956, and telesemeion, trophosemeion, semataxis. What are semaphores? The kind of leaves. Semaphores are the leaves that are interpreted as signs by nectar seekers. Here, well, insects fly around, search for nectar, and well, usually we think what they see, then these are flowers, and so flower is that, what leads them to nectar. But flower in botany is defined morphologically, used morphological terms. There are pistils and stamens and petals and sepals, and that's flower. But now, when you look to this picture here, color, then the white leaf there is morphologically not part of flower, but it is just a modified normal leaf. It's not a petal, not a sepal. So, but obviously, this is namely what's seen from the distance, what attracts first, say, when finding the flower, finding actually the source of nectar later, or yeah. So therefore, being more precise, there should be another term for that. And so Lepik proposes sema from sign, meaning semaphula is leaf, semaphul. So biosemiotic flower is not based on morphological homology, but functional showy parts. It's a showy part. Whatever that is, it can be a petal, sepal. In some cases, even stamens are so big that actually those are colored, and then those are, say, like semapholes. That is important to make a distinction, whether we are speaking here about recognition by organisms, other organisms, by, for instance, insects, or we are speaking about, well, morphological homology, which is completely different. So, There were some more terms Lebig used, like telesemeion, a sign attractive from a distance, or trophosemeion, a signpost to food pointer. Why not to use these also in biosemiotics? And even semataxis to describe the arrangement or development of semaphores. You know, the chemotaxis is a term used in biology as the directed migration of cell in response to a chemical stimulus, such as a growth factor. Then there are also phyllotaxis and anthotaxis, but then he, together with the term semaphore, also introduces the term semataxis. Why not? Another rather old term that was introduced in 1971 was semiochemicals. Semiochemicals, these are chemicals interpreted as science of two basic kinds, intraspecific, which were called pheromones, and interspecific, which are either allomones or chiromones. Allomones favors the producer, chiromone favor the receiver. So semiochemicals at a certain time was a rather popular term. So that's some step made from the chemical biology towards as if semiotics. But then in biosemiotics, it has almost not used. So that's and the reason here is that sign is not a chemical. Sign is not a substance, of course. But using that term semiochemical makes us to feel as if sign might be a molecule. Sign is not a molecule. And semiochemical as a sign is not a chemical substance, but a representamen emerging in semiosis. And that's clearly different. So that is, not a chemical, but a chemical interpreted as sign. So having that distinction in mind, actually, we can use also more often maybe the term semiochemical. And then interestingly, if you look just from the biological larger dictionary, you can also find this semi or sema also appearing in this concept, semaphoront. At first, so I had no idea that that might have any bearing with semiotics, but so I think that also has something. Willy Hennig, who introduced that concept in 1950, was the founder of cladistics, the method so widely used later in all phylogenetic studies. So he describes semaphoront as the character bearer, the individual organisms within a short time span of their life, during which they do not themselves change and hence also do not change their relation to others. So that is that character bearer, the minimal unit. He is using this as a minimal taxonomic unit, but also he understands that this is about the unit for relation to others. An individual during a very small temporal duration, not a point in time of its life. So that means usually taxonomists speak about species as a maybe variety there as the smallest unit, but he also understands that caterpillar and the adult form of the same species of insect should be taxonomically also distinguished. And then they are also functional, certainly. Okay, these were some old terms which might be taken into use as tools in biosemiotic vocabulary. Now, that was a little bit about interpretation. Next, about network of interpretation. Interpretation, we describe it as a process being individual. Every organism interprets. or we may think about this as kind of autocommunicative process, but organisms interacting to each other, interpreting each other, are now communicating. Network of interpretation is already communication. And here, what I would focus is one of consequences of communication, that is natural categorization. Communication leads to discretization in many, many cases, almost universally, various levels, like in human communication, we don't use something like continuous mean, but discretized means, from phonemes to words to sentences to talks, whatever. These are discrete. And likewise, there is a discretization going on in case of interpretation networks in all living beings. Result of reciprocal interpretation, network of interpretation, is various types of congregations, like swarms, bee swarm, or flocks of birds, herds. Mutual recognition as a form of interpreting results in regular spatial patterns. If recognition is interpreted as come closer, very simple, then these swarms and herds of flocks appear. There's no need for any, say, adaptive explanation that there is a flock because that's by some reason safer, or just leads to reproductive success, or enhances survival, or whatever. So that is a secondary. These are all secondary things. But the primary reason for appearing or emerging such congregations is simply interpretation, where the decision is about coming closer. And then another process, or another, let's say, phenomenon of the same simple mutable recognition, if it is interpreted as avoid or stay away, it results territoriality in a limited space. Interpretation of staying away leads to territories, dividing a space into territories. Here is one example of the study of song thrush, a common bird in Europe, how a particular area is divided between individual pairs of the birds, the same area. One particular year where there were 32 territories, and then decades later, when only 8 territories, but still that's now division of space due to this such a very simple network of interpretation. No need to really to start the explanation or from some evolutionary biology. No need. And that is if you go into biological textbooks, they always will explain it via evolutionary adaptation, almost always. It's not necessary. It's the primary reason is simple semiotic process. And then also phenomenon as synchronicity, as a form of natural categorization. In living systems, synchronicity is very often a product of communication, like synchronous heat in animals, or synchronous flowering in plant individuals of the same species, or synchronicity between pollinators, ontogeny, and flowering. They search, and if there is some variability available, then it easily leads to synchronicity. That is, so territoriality and congregations, these are categories, or discretization in space caused by communication, and this is synchronicity as a product of or just discretization in time now caused by communication. And then even more, there is a categorization going on in character space, what's called speciation. What is the origin of species? If mutual recognition is necessary for reproduction, if mutual recognition is necessary for reproduction of organisms, it leads to speciation. And that was, can I say discovered, but at least in a detailed manner described by zoologist, entomologist Hugh Patterson. The book Evolution and the Recognition Concept of Species is the main source of his collection of his texts, his work on this topic. Patterson describes specific mate recognition systems which limit the field for genetic recombination. Specific mate recognition system, recognition as cognitive process, or maybe very simple, but anyhow, semiotic process, is what is limiting genetic recombination, not vice versa. And indeed, all bioparental organisms, those who have two parents in order to be born, became naturally, communicatively divided into species. We see, very nicely this division into species, namely in bioparental organisms, not at all so in uniparental, that those who do not require this mutual recognition in order to reproduce. Like, bacteria usually can simply divide, no communication required. So, and species are more or less conventional. So, or at least very often. So these taxonomists have certain conventions how then to speak about species there. But these are not groups based on natural categorization. And here, this Patterson's view, Patterson himself opposed, criticized, related his view to Ernst Mayer's biological concept of species, which was isolational, where, according to Mayer, the barrier, crossing barrier, should be the primary cause for dividing into species. Patterson stresses and argues for the recognition, isolation then would be secondary, not the primary. So Patterson here is introducing, we could say, some kind of semiotic process, a semiotic understanding of the origin of species. Hugh Patterson was working in South Africa. I just quote a paper by Johnson, Darwin's Legacy in South African Evolutionary Biology, published in South African Journal of Science in 2009. The University of the Witwatersrand, which actually Witwatersrand is not so far from here. No, not so far. Yeah, was indisputably the leading center for evolutionary biology in South Africa during 1970s, 1980s. The zoologist Hugh Patterson, who was based at the Wits, developed the recognition species concept in the 1970s, which strongly influenced the generation of South African biologists. Patterson's influence is especially evident in the book Species and Speciation, edited by Elizabeth Verba. Elizabeth Verba was a close collaborator of Stephen Jay Gould. Stephen Jay Gould, who has been, well, in Harvard University, in Harvard, paleontologist, they both, Verba and Gould, paleontologist. Elizabeth Verba was who, together with Gould, introduced into biology the term exaptation, which again is very important step made in theoretical biology, I would say, towards biosemiotics, because in case of exaptation, the functional change precedes the genetic one. This book contained contributions from a wide range of botanists, zoologists, and paleontologists who had participated in a symposium at the Transvaal Museum in 1982. So that means in South Africa, there is a very important route for biosemiotics since 1970s already. Later he worked he moved to Australia and worked in Brisbane University, where I also met him. And in our correspondence, I asked his view on biosemiotics. So he actually never wrote, never published in his papers the term semiotics. But in our correspondence, he clearly said, yes, this is semiotics. So now, if it is, then why to call it simply recognition concept of species? We should call it biosemiotic concept of species. And this is the origin of species, not due to natural selection, but through communication. In that case, formation of species boundaries is a result of constraints in sexual communication via recognition window. Recognition window, and that's, yeah, we've done some attempts now to introduce more this concept in biology. Now, next is semiotic fitting. Now, Darwinian biology has this void. There's a central concept of fitness. Fitness, what is measured by our reproductive success, and which is actually, yeah, a quantitative concept. Now, when we speak about semiotic fitting, meaning relations, semiotic relations, they are qualitative relations. Now, a root of this concept is some work by Daniel Jansen. Daniel Jansen, who is an ecologist, who has worked some decades in Costa Rica and published a whole series of works on the problems of diversity of tropical ecosystems, diversity of ecosystems as such. What are the processes? What are the mechanisms? What are responsible for their diversity and how their biosenosis becomes formed by species. And now, what he pointed out that this may not be the process or evolutionary process of what's usually called coevolution. He writes, a major part of the Earth's surface may be occupied largely by organisms that are rich in ecological interactions and have virtually no detailed evolutionary history with one another. So let's say more classical understanding has been that those organisms that live regularly together have lived together for evolutionary sense a long time, and why they fit to each other is because of their evolutionary adaptation to each other, because of their coevolution. But now Janssen states that a bee is not necessarily co-evolved with a flower it pollinates. A caterpillar is not necessarily co-evolved with its sole species of host plant, but they found them as fitting and became habituated to them. So a new, species, population, group of organisms come to a new place and say there obviously tries to find the source of food, the conditions, whether there are in this place, what would fit them. And if they find that, then they would stay, establishing relation with one species, further on with the other, or some other need to fulfill, enriching during time their network of local relations. And indeed, here in South Africa, many ecosystems have been more or less the same for very, very long time, in evolutionary time. In Northern Europe, from where I come, in Estonia, we don't have any ecosystem what would have been longer than 10,000 years ago, so, because of glaciers. The country was covered by 2 kilometers of ice, so before that. So therefore, everything, all life was removed. But now in our ecosystems, there are all these relationships nicely. All species have been introduced there, came there in time, what is not evolutionary time, because these few thousand years normally are not at all enough in order to change species. So that is all fitting to each other. What is the basic process in formation of our ecosystems? There it's simply, in the north, it's better seen. So ecological fitting can be both a precursor to evolutionary diversity or maintainer of evolutionary stasis, depending on conditions. But this is primary. So it happens first. Evolutionary modifications are now secondary. They, of course, evolutionary processes are there. Natural selection is there, but it works, so to say, after this recognition and fitting, semiotic fitting processes have taken place already. So ecological fitting, this is fitting through recognition and communication, not through natural selection. So accordingly, semiotic fitting, or this what he calls ecological fitting, is actually semiotic fitting, because this is defined by semiotic processes. Therefore, it's better to use the term semiotic here. Semiotic fitting is fitting through communication or semiosis, through interpreting and choice, not through natural selection. So interpreting leads to some decisions and action and finding. The processes of ecological fitting are choosing and learning, which means that ecological fitting is a semiotic process. There we can make some classification of these processes of semiotic fitting. It's typology, and here one possible typology is based on this complexity of learning. Semiosis is not absolutely always, but usually, almost always, resulted by some learning or related or connected to learning, say. And if we think about main types of learning, the simplest one is imprinting. Then associating is a little more complex. Then imitation, I think, is even more complex. And then making convention can be also seen as a very high version of learning. So fitting by an imprinting, which is iconic or vegetative level learning. This is where organism establishes the relation and keeps it by using its recognition window. While in case of fitting by association, which is now indexical, used by animals, available for animals, organisms, then use marks that are correlated with the object of linkage in order to find the object of relation. And then fitting by imitation, which is rather widespread in case of vertebrate animals. An organism acquires the means to establish or keep the relation by imitating the behaviors existing in the community. And the last one is only human. Networks of semiotic fitting. Not just one organism, but all population, all community of organisms are involved in semiotic fitting. Little observation of that opportunity. Semiotic fitting is always local, particular place and time. This means that fitting is forming a local community, establishing the locality of the system with a tendency towards place connection, hence an obvious relationship with the aspect of nativeness. Local ecosystem consists of species what may have very few relationships to other species there. Usually weeds, for instance, are those which don't have much relationship to other species, while some other may have many relationships. And so that integration means that the relationships become richer. Now, diversity of a semiotic system is strongly dependent on the mutual fitting of agents of which the semiotic system consists. This is, I think, rather trivial, rather simple. Simply to understand that. So that the regular integrated, let's say, semiotically integrated part of living beings in an ecosystem forms what we may call them Biosemiosis. And another interesting also point might here be that nativeness, the concept so often also used in human cultures, is not based on one's genealogy, not based on one's genes, but one's richness of local semiotic relations. I even think that if we really apply that understanding of nativeness, that would help to avoid many conflicts. Nativeness is related to mutual rich semiotic fitting, network of semiotic fitting. And it also is related to sustainability. Sustainability is a result of a process of certain harmonization in ecosystem, harmonization of biosemiosis. Harmony itself is an aesthetic concept, of course. And here we may also start to use some concept not so used earlier. That's a semiostasis, defined as balance based on semiotic relations. By the way, the term semiostasis appeared in print only last year by Brazilian biosemiotician Vinicius Romanini. Well, related to the concept of homeostasis, which is stabilized state, but here it's balanced based on semiotic relation in case of semiostasis. The homeostasis doesn't require interpreting there. It can be really purely physical. And then semiosis. This is a succession in biosemiotic systems. Homeostasis was a term introduced by Conrad Waddington about stabilized flow rather than stabilized state. And in the same, analogically, we can speak about semiosis then, so succession in biosemiotic systems. And semiosis, I would say, is a fundamental aesthetic process because it has a tendency to lead to harmonization if we define it as succession in biosemiotic systems, excluding humans. Anyway, we come to explain why the old native communities are the most valuable in terms of biodiversity, and often also in case of cultural persistence and also aesthetics. Conclusions. Same points. Regular relationships between organisms are based on semiotic, cognitive, communicative processes on organisms' interpretation. Reciprocal recognition processes result in natural categorization. It means formation of spatial and temporal regular patterns. Biological species are products of communicative categorization. Semiotic fitting produces biosemiosis. Semiosis, succession in biosemiotic systems, is a fundamental aesthetic process. And introduction of semiotic concepts, among them the old ones, for instance, semiophils, recognition concept of species, semiotic fitting, is helpful and even necessary for explaining the fundamental role of semiosis in organization of ecosystems. And last but not least, semiotic ecology replaces the neo-Darwinian understanding of ecology. Biosemiotics changes forever our understanding of ecosystems, or notice semiophils and other phenomena of biosemiotic relations. Thank you very much.